Good afternoon. My name is Gidget Mata, and with me are Frances Cortesano, Janine Valencia, and Bernadette Ventura. We are Group 9, and our topic for today is trolling. Before we begin, let us first define what a troll is. A troll is someone who posts or comments online in order to bait people, deliberately trying to provoke an argument or an emotional reaction. And now that we know what a troll is, let us now continue to our case background.
Here's some background information that will be helpful in understanding the case at hand. Cyber troops can be defined as government or political party forces that use social media as a tool to manipulate public opinion. This is a relatively recent phenomenon, starting with the rapid growth of social media and internet use beginning around the 2010s. We can see why by looking to the graph by ourworldindata.org, where the number of users per social media platform per year can be seen. All platforms listed can see increases in user base year after year, and the most growth has been seen in the years after 2010. Even though reports of organized social media manipulation have been seen starting in 2010, by 2017 at least 28 countries have been identified with evidence of organizations dedicated to online manipulation of opinion. By the year 2020, this number has jumped up to at least 81. It is important to also note that cyber troops are present in countries with authoritarian regimes to ones with democratic systems. It is not limited to one type or another. Furthermore, these efforts come from many different forms, which include government agencies, political parties, private firms, and social media influencers and users. One way to summarize what cyber troops do is that they take advantage of social media accounts to promote or suppress certain beliefs, and they have many ways of doing so. Firstly, there are different account types, which includes bots, which are fully automated. There are also human curated accounts, which are specifically made to show human-like interaction. There are also hijacked, stolen, or impersonation accounts, which is where existing accounts with existing followers are stolen or hacked, or profiles of existing figures are impersonated to get more attention. It should be noted that this type of account is seen the least. There are also different types of propaganda and messaging for cyber troops. They can be pro-government or pro-political party propaganda, smear campaigns to attack opposing figures or ideas. They can also be discouraging citizen participation through direct trolling or harassment, or they can promote division and polarization in its citizens, which is the most common in democracies. With that, there are also different methods by which this messaging is spread. This can include, but are not limited to, intentionally creating disinformation or manipulated media, which is what we know as fake news. There's also user profiling, where certain political content is pushed to users based on browsing or consumer data. There's also the mass reporting of opposing posts or accounts to suppress the opposition or unwanted ideas. There's no one way to classify cyber troops, since the needs of each country are different from one another. Cyber troops teams come in different sizes, capabilities, and budget. Different countries have different levels of sophistication and investment on cyber troops. Generally, high cyber troop capacity entails large number of personnel, a high budget, and use of various strategies, along with full-time operation. On the other hand, low cyber troop capacity usually means smaller teams, budgets, and less strategies. They're usually found only active in election periods. One thing of note is that the Philippines is among at least 18 countries that are identified with high cyber troop capacities in at least 2020. Other countries on this list include major powers like China, Russia, the US, and the UK. Though now we have an idea of what strategies are used, what do they really look like? To understand more on what trolling is, here are some examples. For one, political figures have used trolls to harass journalists and vocal activists. They can flood comments and posts with hateful messages, especially ones based on race, gender, or orientation. Trolls can also be used to push sensationalized news, to further an agenda, and to purposely spread misinformation to suppress unwanted narratives. The trolls that can be used appear as groups of people or bots that are aimed for harassment, and they can also pose as grassroots activists under a false identity to appear as though these thoughts are naturally occurring and normalized. In an anonymous interview with a real hired Philippine-based troll, it was said that they intentionally try to join large existing groups, meaning at least a few thousand members, especially on Facebook. They especially target overseas Filipino groups, and they try to get as much engagement as possible, which means they resort to emotionally target tactics like sarcastic replies just to increase responses. Another anonymous interview and other studies, Filipino influencers and content creators can also be contracted by troll farms or political figures themselves to spread a message. It is highly likely that a public political endorsement is paid for and they may or may not align with an influencer's real beliefs. Other content creators are used to make shareable and user-generated content that utilizes an existing fan base to influence the perception of a candidate and to spread certain narratives. I think many of us at one point have at least encountered news like YouTube or Facebook accounts that can be very political and inflammatory, especially during voting season.
Now, moving on to the political effects of trolling. For the most part, they are hired by politicians or the government to spread information that they desire. They make it look like a majority of people agree or disagree on a certain topic, which then starts topics trending, conversations being started, and debates being sparked, which then condemns you to follow their narrative. In what ways do political propaganda affect foreign and domestic audiences? For the most part, in terms of foreign audiences, political propaganda is almost their best form of understanding or realizing the situation in the motherland. For them, it's secondhand information gained through news outlets or social media, while for those domestic audiences, their day-to-day lives vary from those living abroad. Their reality differs from those in a foreign land. This is because they have first-hand access to the reality of what's happening here, and they can better decide whether something is really happening, it's fake news, etc. However, even despite this, most are still very rooted in their beliefs, and political propaganda may just further their belief in a certain politician, while the chance of changing their minds to otherwise through digital means are less. In what ways can social media affect someone's decision? Constantly being exposed to certain information eventually gets you to start being interested in a certain topic or start to want to know more. Constant exposure to something in social media will eventually get you to try a product, install a game, or even convince you to believe in something or someone. Just like how you are what you eat, you can apply this to your information consumption as well. Moving on.
So, as for the budgets and expenditures under troll farms, it is reported that trolls earn more than the average monthly wage, which is 16,500, and compared to a working troll who earn 30,000 to 100,000 pesos each month. So, around 75% of Filipinos are online, mostly on Facebook and YouTube. And that seems to be unlucky since online trolls are most capable of enhancing their skills in Facebook and YouTube. So basically, by the means of enhancing it, they want to make it more real and trustworthy. So we have this case study, or let's say a study under Temtech that was published in 2020 titled Industrialized Disinformation 2020 Global Inventory of Organized Social Media Manipulation. So in this study, they studied 82 countries, and they even mentioned the total money that was spent for troll farms. That is $60 million between January 2019 and November 2020. So moving on from supply and demand. So for an easier interpretation, let's say supply is the sender and the demand is and the demand is the receiver. So basically, when we say sender, the supply will always be the creator of fake news and dishonest information by making it look legit and authentic in the eyes of the audience. And its objective is to lead its opponent to a downstream stage, whereas their image will be beaten. In addition, gullible people are also counted by spreading fake news without the clarity of its authenticity. So for the demand, it is the audience that is one of the factors that contributes to shaping public opinion in social media. So moving on from supply and demand. So for an easier interpretation, let's say supply is the sender and the demand is the receiver. So basically, when we say sender, the supply will always be the creator of fake news and dishonest information by making it look legit and authentic in the eyes of the audience. And its objective is to lead its opponent to a downstream stage, whereas their image will be beaten. In addition, gullible people are also counted by spreading fake news without the clarity of its authenticity. So for the demand, it is the audience that is one of the factors that contributes to shaping public opinion.
So, to provide the context about the application of trolling in real life, we provided 3 examples in global and local trolling here in our country. In international, one example is the Obama and Trump trolling tactics. So the current and former president troll each other, which made the nastiest public dispute in modern presidential history. One that began on deeply personal terms and which now plays out nearly every time Trump finds a policy that he disliked or perceived double standard. One example of trolling by Obama was when he made fun of Trump's claims of a rigged election during the 2016 presidential election campaign. So Obama mocked Trump by saying, "I'd advise Mr. Trump to stop whining and go try to make his case to get votes." So in response, Trump has repeatedly attacked Obama's policies and personal life, particularly through his Twitter account. And Trump also famously promoted the birther conspiracy, which falsely claimed that Obama was not born in the United States and therefore ineligible to be president. For the local, one example is the Cambridge Analytica scandal. The Cambridge Analytica scandal blew up in March 2018 after an employee of the company came forward revealing that the company had access to data of millions of Facebook users to target them for political campaigns. So what Wiley claims is that the Cambridge Analytica used data harvested from Facebook to target Philippine voters with personalized propaganda in a similar manner to how it operated during the 2016 US presidential election. So the propaganda reportedly included the fake news stories and negative messaging about the opposing candidates. So in 2010, Philippine presidential campaign of Benigno Noynoy Aquino III hired the SEL towards communication and media management in modern political campaigns, which caused them to successfully win. And the firm was reportedly used data-driven targeting and messaging strategies to appeal to specific voter groups. For the last example is the political election and campaign here in the Philippines. So according to Farigay 2022, election campaigns so far have also exhibited a more intense and varied use of social media to sow disinformation and fake news to either support or undermine certain candidates. During the 2016 election campaign, there is a key debate whether social media helped Duterte win, and the analysis of Facebook activities and comments confirms that Duterte's online fans were the most active, engaged, and networked. As such, the said type of digital behavior seems consistent with the actions of paid trolls and influencers. Furthermore, the impact of social media is more evident in latest election, May 2022. The limitation imposed by the COVID-19 epidemic led to disinformation, threat of foreign interference, and micro-targeting.
We now present some recommendations for the Philippines to progress on the topic of trolling as a whole. First, how do we counter trolls? On a government level, we suggest that legislation should be enacted that penalizes the use of troll farms, especially for high-level politicians. Their actions, like Senate Resolution 768 that was aimed for recommending an investigation of public funds being spent on troll farms, but it was not implemented fully. There's also the infamous SIM Registration Act that was aimed to stop scammers, but stopping trolls was another possible byproduct of this, since it can tie identities to social media accounts and therefore trolls to real identities. However, this act has many flaws and critics, with many concerns based on data breach dangers and privacy dangers. With issues of fake identification and identity theft present in the nation, there are more negative impacts that could come from this act and still no way to hold trolls truly accountable. Lastly, we suggest that media literacy, especially for online platforms, should be taught in educational systems. Since social media has cemented its way into society, we should incorporate how to navigate these platforms responsibly into what we teach citizens, especially the next coming generations. Moving on, for social media companies, we suggest that they offer more fact-checking features on their platforms. Sites like Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter have features like this, but it's mostly limited to large worldwide topics like COVID-19 and mostly US politics. Not so much for the politics and events happening here in the Philippines. We also suggest that anti-disinformation policies are implemented with stronger punishments to deter the perpetrators. And we also suggest deplatforming figures online that are known to spread disinformation to a wide audience. We also suggest that more development should be done on technology that can identify and target bot accounts to reduce their numbers and power. And individuals, we emphasize that media literacy should be promoted, especially for vulnerable groups. We also suggest that the popularization and normalization of troll hunting teams should be increased. We also want to emphasize to individuals on avoiding spreading information, disinformation or not, without fact-checking and checking credibility. On that note, how exactly can we know the credibility of websites and how can we identify if news is fake or not? There are many simple things to look out for. First, you should check the sources and the writer. More experienced writers who cite sources are often going to bring more credible information to you. You should also practice reading the entire article instead of snippets or just a headline. In addition, you should identify the political bias of a site, even known credible ones, so that you can understand the framing of the facts. You should also know how to understand when something is satire. And lastly, one big red flag with media that is fake is when proper grammar and formatting are not used. More on media literacy for seniors, there are existing courses like MediaWise for seniors that can be used to help the older generation understand how to navigate social media. Moreover, studies on media literacy courses that suggest more community-based, intergenerational, and slow-paced courses that are taught with compassion for seniors are better and more effective in implementation to propagate media literacy. With all that in mind, a realistic application is to integrate media literacy development in our existing services for the elderly, like residential care centers, community-based programs, and older persons foster home programs. We should also begin development on lesson plans and teaching materials focused on media literacy so that resources are already available to integrate this topic in schools. On an individual basis, we should personally avoid focusing on spreading news that is sensational and cannot be confirmed to be credible. We should also utilize reporting and blocking features to avoid fake news sources and trolls. We should always put more trust in experts over influencers, because no matter how much you think you relate to an influencer, they are not an expert and we never really know them off screen. We should also try and be proactive by informing less media illiterate and less tech savvy friends or relatives about fake news and how to identify and combat it.
Thank you for listening to our presentation. Now, before we end, I'd like to ask you, would you be a troll?